Welcome back to another ComCon Virtual 2021 virtual session. Tuesday, it is 11 o'clock in the morning, UK time or UTC time, and we've got David Duffett with us for this one. Last year, David gave a talk about like the pillars of being able to speak publicly, geek speaking publicly, and he came to me this year and said, "Are you interested in? Do you want another talk along those same lines, or what?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, let's deep dive into one of those pillars." So that's what he's going to do. But first off, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, and I've got them right here in front of me. So they are Subspace Daily, Element, and Mux. They're our platinum sponsors. Thank you very, very much. Without them, the conference wouldn't have even got off the ground. We've got our gold sponsors of Toulouse, 100 milliseconds, and Diet. We've got Loway, Sangoma, Millicast, WebRTC Ventures as our silver sponsors. And then we've got our community sponsors, Jambones, Telecurve, and Pion. And then we've got all of our AV partners that physically make the conference happen. So we've got PSP, Millicast, Broadcaster, Subspace, Element, Mux, and me, Echo. So yes, if you're watching on YouTube, then go click on like and subscribe. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're watching it live, great. But also head over to YouTube and like and subscribe, because it means we can do more with the content that's stored on YouTube. So I'm just going to pass this over to David to talk to us about public speaking, so that I can maybe do a better job at public speaking and stop saying and are in all of my intros and outros. But see, I did it again. But let's just go over to David, and we'll catch up with David after this the recording has gone out.
Well, thanks for having me along, Dan. I'm delighted to be part of ComCon. I think I'm right in saying that I've been part of every ComCon so far, whether it's been the live in-person ones or the virtual online ones. So I'm really delighted to be part of it again, and thanks for having me. And I'd like to talk, as I do from time to time, about geeks speaking. It's my aim to help technical people be better at presenting to non-technical people. And this chat is entitled A Deep Dive into One of the 7 Protocols. And instantly I hear you saying, well, what are the 7 protocols? And I'm going to say, don't worry about that. We're going to get into that as we go through the presentation. So let's see what we've got in store. Here's the agenda for our time together today. I want to give a bit of a background why I came across or developed the 7 protocols in terms of helping geeks to speak, and then move on to the protocols themselves and describe what they are. I'll give you an overview of all 7, but as the title suggests, today we're going to do a deep dive into one of them. And there's also a magic factor, which I will bring out as well. And then, as you can see, the third point there is doing a deep dive. And here we're revealing which protocol it is. It's protocol 2, which is the plan protocol. But as I said, I'll give an overview of all of them as we go along. So here's the imbalance that I wanted to address. Having worked in the technical and telecoms industry for many, many years, I saw geeks in these companies sat in the corner of the office with the curtains drawn across where things are a little bit dark. They're getting on with their coding. They're wearing T-shirts with key jokes on, like there are 1-0 types of people, those that understand binary and those that don't, that kind of stuff. They're getting pizzas on a Friday, but round the corner is the salesman, and I know that Will Burgundy, or whatever his name is, he's not a salesman, but he's the anchor man, but I picked him for a comic effect. But there's the salesman in there, expensed BMW X5 or whatever, and it just struck me that geeks need to be better recognized, because they're the people that create the products, that service the products, that support the products. And so I wanted to address it. I didn't want to take anything away from the salespeople, but I wanted to address what I thought was an imbalance. So these underlying issues, it's the geeks that make and support given products or services, but it seems that they're not always paid quite as well as the salespeople. Perhaps they're recognised less. You don't see geeks getting sent to holiday destinations for achieving certain targets and things like that. And so the rewards for geeks just didn't seem to be on the same level. And so, in short, what I'm after doing is helping geeks to be more in themselves. Therefore, they can do more, and ultimately they can have more success, whatever their definition of that emotive word success is. So let's have a look then. The thing with geeks is they're great at talking to other geeks and they're respected by other geeks. But in real life, when we get out in the real world, there are many presentations that a geek might need to make to less technical audiences, those being things like job interviews, when the hiring manager is more at the manager end and not so much at the technical end, perhaps sales presentations where a geek might want to help out giving technical information or advice, and then attracting funding or selling a company or whatever it might be. Even an IPO presentations are needed there, but not always to technical audiences. And so my job really is to try and help geeks bridge the gap from delivering presentations where it's obvious they know their stuff to the point on the right hand side where they're really communicating. And of course, communicating is a two-way thing, as we know. So let me give you a quick truth bomb. People in your audience really don't care how much you know, because that's often the geek currency, is the technical amount of information they know. But people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. They want to be loved. They want to be looked after. And so geeks that can speak in public comfortably and confidently are people that will make good progress, not just in their presentations, but in many other areas of life, because as you gain confidence in delivering presentations, that is helpful in other places too. So what are the common issues that we face? Well, of course, one of them that we face as geeks presenting to non-technical people is we're a bit too technical. We get into jargon, we get into deep levels of technical detail that are perhaps unnecessary for what we're doing. Sometimes there is a lack of connection with the audience, and that is a big difficulty. I've seen so many geeks who are great people give presentations, and somehow there's an unease in the audience, sometimes leading to awkward pauses. But what it means is the audience don't feel at liberty to ask the questions they want to ask, and that's something that geeks need help with. So what do we have to do? Well, all of the answers are in the 7 protocols that I've distilled making great presentations into. And there's a magical factor too, a magic factor. So let's go through them. The first protocol is the purpose, establishing the purpose of the presentation. It seems a crazy thing to have to state, but so often when people are asked to do presentations, they just jump into rattling off some slides in Keynote or Prezi or PowerPoint or whatever it is, and they don't actually sit back and think about the purpose of the presentation. Then we come to planning. That's the one we're going to home in on. Planning is where we think about the structure of the presentation, how to organize our materials for best delivery, and also for helping the audience recall what we've been giving them so that they can make use of it later. Then there's the prepare protocol. That's all about walking in the audience's shoes to make sure that you deliver a presentation that's suitable for them and not just delivered in the way that you would like to deliver it. Then we got practice. And of course, the key phrase there is that amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they just can't get it wrong. Practice is a very important aspect. Then there's participation. Knowing that people love having things done with them, but not to them, we want to engage an audience and help them participate in what we're doing so they feel part of it. One of the key equations to remember there is that involvement equals commitment. If you involve your audience, they'll be more committed to the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. Then there's the actual performance of delivering the presentation itself. And in that protocol, I would talk about things like dealing with nerves and how to use pauses, pacing, and pronunciation to make maximum effect. And then the last one, the often forgotten protocol of the post-event follow-up and dealing with things after the actual presentation. But as I said, we're going to deep dive into number 2, let's put that back very quickly, the plan protocol. But let's not move on from this until we look at the thing down the middle, rapport. rapport is the magic factor, because rapport is your communications channel between you and your audience. If you don't establish a rapport with the audience, they won't feel comfortable in communicating with you and asking questions, and you won't be able to read them as well. So rapport is the magic factor. But protocol 2 here, the plan. And what I'm going to do is just look at 3 headings here: organizing your material. And so this really is key take-home information that you can have, use, put to work, and improve your presentations by using the advice you're about to get. So organizing the material, structuring your presentation for maximum effect, and that includes attention spans, dealing with attention spans, and the keys to recall, helping your audience to recall the information you give them at a later date. Okay, so let's look at organizing your material. So as I said, very often when people are asked to do a presentation, they jump onto presentation tools like Prezi, PowerPoint, or Keynote and start hacking on some slides. But actually, you should give thought about the material that you want to convey. And I'm going to offer you 2 methods: the traditional top-down, or the maverick bottom-up way of organizing your material. So the top down is the simple and traditional one. As I said, you pick a title or a heading for the presentation you're going to give. You pick 3 main points, because there is a power in the number 3. You'll probably recognize that great speakers and preachers and all sorts of different people use the power of 3s, the 3 Ps, or the 3 S's, or the 3 main things. 3s are very effective in presentation. So try and constrain yourself to 3 main points, and then break those into 3 points of detail. And as you can see, although I've said top down, it actually works left to right on this particular picture here. You've got the title, then we've got the 3 main points and the 3 points of detail in each. That's the top down approach. I actually prefer the bottom up approach, because just coming back to the top down approach, that can constrain you. So when you do points 1, 2, and 3, you're then thinking inside points 1, 2, and 3. And so you're constraining yourself. That might be a good thing. On the other hand, it might be a bad thing. And that's why I like the bottom up approach. And what you do with the bottom up approach is you get some some Post-its, and you just brainstorm every single thing you want to cover onto Post-it notes. And then you just throw them onto a wall or a floor or anything that's convenient. And you can see this picture. There's lots of Post-it notes there. And look what it says on the second bullet point. It says, this allows you to not be restricted by headings or categories. So in other words, you're not thinking of the 3 main points. You're just putting everything down. And this is a great way of organizing your material, because the next thing you do is then look at all of those Post-its and put them into groups. And what you'll find is they almost kind of assemble themselves, that when you look across them, you can think, oh yeah, those 5 things all go over here under this heading. And so what you can do is put them into groups, and then choose headings or names or titles or categories based on the groupings of those Post-it notes. And the great thing about this is you've not been constrained inside the framework of the headings. So you've been able to literally put everything you were thinking of. Now, it may be that when you organize them, there's one at the edge that doesn't really fit into a category of one sort or another. And you can decide then whether it's important enough to build in by itself, or whether actually you can get away without it. And it might be more appropriate to leave it out of this particular presentation. You brainstormed it, but actually it's not really one of the 3 main things, or however many you're going to deal with. So that's the bottom up approach, which I personally favor. That's what I would do when I'm creating a fresh presentation. So that's organizing your materials. Now, in terms of structuring your presentations, I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but presentations, just like other things, have beginnings, middles, and endings. So in your presentation, when you consider the beginning, you need to think about grabbing the attention of the audience and letting them know why they need to listen to you and what you're going to cover. Then there is the middle of the presentation. As I said, we can use the power of 3s to help cement things in people's minds. But we also need attention spans, not attention pans, as it says on the slide, but attention spans, and think to think about the keys to recall, the keys to getting things into people's memories. And then when we think about the ending of a presentation, the last thing we want to do is let it whimper out with a Q&A session that kind of fades to zero. What we want to do is end on a bang, not a whimper. And so I'm going to advise you never to finish with questions and answers. Okay, so let's think about the beginning. And I'm going to offer you a handy little mnemonic here called intro. And as you can see, the I means impact. So think about grabbing the audience's attention. This could be done with a joke at the beginning. If you're the sort of person that can use humor, you've got to be true to yourself. So don't do things that just don't fit in with you. It could be a fascinating fact or a statistic. So for instance, I'm here to talk about road safety, and I'm only going to be talking for 15 minutes, but sadly, 25 people are going to, lose a limb or be injured or whatever it is, whatever the statistic is in the few minutes that I'm talking on the roads of Great Britain or wherever it might be. An impactful statistic is very useful. Or do you know how much money is lost through cyber attacks or whatever you're talking about? Find a key statistic if that's what you want to use. So you need impact. You need to grab people's attention. Once you've got their attention, don't waste it. Tell them why they need to talk to you. Need to listen to you. Why they need to listen to what you're going to say. So it could be because you're an expert in the field and you've got many years of experience. It could be because you're going to cover some very important material that affects their working lives or whatever. And then crystallize what you're going to tell them in a title. Have a title. A talk should always have a title so that people can kind of latch onto what it's about. Then we've got the range, and that's where you tell them what you're going to tell them. That's where you cover the range of things that you're going to say. And it's helpful there if you can tell them the three main things you're going to cover, because you're effectively giving them three signposts about what's coming later. And then the last thing is to further detail what you're going to do by either giving some objectives or outline aims for the talk. So, by the end of the talk, you'll know the new work process, or by the end of the talk, you'll understand why it's better to program in Python than Go, or whatever it is. And you'll see that I've got a slash with the questions there. You can think of it as intro or intro Q with a Q at the end, and the Q can be your question policy. I welcome questions anytime during this talk, or actually, we're on a bit of a tight timeline, so just hold your questions to the end, please. Or we haven't even got time for questions, and so here's my email address and you can send me questions afterwards. Whatever you want. You're the boss. You're delivering the presentation. So that's the beginning of the presentation. Use that mnemonic intro to focus on the impact, the need, the title of your talk, the range of things you're going to cover, and what your objectives or what your aims are, and possibly a question policy. Then we've got the middle. And in the middle of a talk, as I said, you can use the power of threes, have three main points, but here are the keys to recall. And you notice I've got another handy mnemonic here. It's proof. Your audience wants proof. And if you're trying to get things into people's minds, you need to remember these things: primacy and recency, or the firsts and lasts. So you probably remember your first day in your current job. You haven't had the last day yet. If you think about your last job, the one that you've come from, then you might remember the first day in that job and the last day, but you probably don't remember all the days in between. If you've watched a film recently, you'll remember the beginning of the film and the end of the film, and you might remember other points in the middle of it, and those would actually relate to the OOF, the overemphasis, the outstanding and familiarity, which I'll come on to. But there's a lot of power in firsts and lasts. For instance, did you know that the first ad in a TV ad break and the last ad in a TV ad break cost more than all the others? Because people understand that the first ad is more impactful and the last ad, just before we go back to the show, is more impactful. So think about primacy and recency. That's why we tell people what we're going to tell them. We outline our key points at the beginning before we go through the detail, and at the end we summarize, because we're taking advantage of primacy and recency. People's attention spans actually go a little bit like that in a session. So if you've got a 20-minute session or a 30-minute session, or absolute maximum, I would say a 45-minute session, you don't really want anything longer than that in a single sitting, then the attention span will be great at the beginning, it will wane a bit, and then it will come back up near the end. Now, if you have got 45 minutes or maybe an hour, you can actually buy yourself more attention span by splitting it into two. And so then instead of getting that one curve, you get two curves, the beginning and end of the first session and the beginning and end of the second session. So primacy and recency are key for you to think about. Then there's overemphasis, laboring a given point. So if we're giving a talk about safety and there's just one key thing like, remember to always wear your high-vis vest or whatever it is, you could humorously repeat that through the talk. Did I mention wearing your high-vis vest? Giving overemphasis. Or maybe humor isn't your thing. Maybe you're more of a serious person. Some hard-hitting stuff around high-vis vests. Overemphasis will also help get things into people's minds. Then there's outstanding points. Anything that's outstanding in any experience is obviously remembered. For instance, if a friend of yours showed you 20 pictures of their recent holiday, and most of them were countryside scenes, but it turns out that one of them was a dog riding a bike, that would be outstanding, and that would be in your memory because it's an outstanding thing. And then the last one is the F for familiarity. It's links to what people already know. Again, if your friend is showing you 20 photos of their recent holiday and one of the pictures happens to be somewhere you've been, you'll relate to that more and you'll remember that more because it's a link to what you already know. And this, by the way, is why we harness the power of analogies in presentations. We say, programming in Go is a little bit like programming in this other language you already know. Or when you're introducing Ohm's law to people in the world of electrics or electronics, you might say, actually, Ohm's law and the flow of current, well, we can symbolize it or think about it like water running through a pipe. A hose pipe, and if we put our feet on the pipe, then that reduces that reduces the flow of the water, and we can reduce the flow of electricity through a circuit. So you link to what people can already relate to or what they already know. So that's the keys to the recall or getting things loaded into people's memories. This helps you actually to kind of open up the filing cabinets in people's minds and drop things in. If you use primacy, recency, overemphasis, which could be repetition or some other form of overemphasis, going with outstanding things. So in a presentation, that could be that you've talked through 3 or 4 different points, and then you make a particular point by doing a live demo or getting somebody out of the audience to participate in something. That would be outstanding. And then the last one was familiarity, links with what people already know. So that's the middle of the presentation. Then we've got the end of the presentation. And here's the key. When you're delivering a presentation, whether it's a video conference presentation, whether it's an in-person presentation, you need to stay in control. Don't hand control over to the MC or the compere or whoever it is to just finish with questions and answers. Now, that's harder, of course, in an online thing, because especially if it's pre-recorded, because the recording is going to finish and then you might go to live Q&A. But in the context of a live presentation or a live video conference or webinar, whatever it might be, it's always best to finish with your own summary of your key points after you've taken questions or after you've said you're not going to take questions, but just handle the concept of questions towards the end of your presentation, but not at the end. So you want to avoid the fading finish. As I said before, what you're looking to do is totally avoid finishing with a whimper instead of a bang. You be responsible for the ending of your presentation, and you bring out the key things that you want to say as the very last thing, so that those are what was remembered. Because you'll remember what I was talking about when I talked about attention spans. You want to be in this zone up here at the end of the presentation, not with people watching something fizzle out into no questions. You want them to be, when their key attention is being paid to you, you want to be giving them the summary of the key points of your presentation. Okay, now that is going to ensure, following the 7 protocols and specifically what we've been talking about with the planning one, that's going to absolutely ensure that you have a great rapport with your audience. And you've probably seen this picture. This picture represents a bad connection. when you've got a bad internet connection, you're trying to watch a video, it says buffering, it's all stilted or it's pausing. Your connection with your audience, the thing that links you to them, is your rapport with them. That's why it was outlined in red, lettered in red on the one of the initial slides. And that's why when you arrange the 7 protocols, that word rapport neatly drops down the middle of them, because it's the absolute key. And it's important that you do your absolute best to make a connection with the audience, maybe talking about shared experiences, maybe talking about shared other things. The key is getting your audience on your side, because they're not going to take anything from you until they know, they like, and they trust you. Okay, so here it is. Always keep engagement in mind in everything you do. And when you're establishing the purpose of your presentation, you can talk to members of the audience ahead of time, or the person that's asking you to deliver the presentation, when you're discussing the purpose, and say, look, I've written this very short, 2 paragraphs about what the purpose of the presentation is. How do you feel about that? And you can rattle that backwards and forwards between you and the person that asked you, or you and the potential audience, until you've got to a point where everybody's agreed. Then we did the plan protocol, which is what we just talked about. And again, in planning, you're further enhancing your rapport with the audience, because you're thinking about delivering things in the most mindful way for them. Then we got the preparation. That's all about walking in the audience's shoes. Make sure you deliver the presentation the way they want to receive it, rather than the way you want to give it. You'll have a natural learning style, and you'll do things in that mold if you're not careful, but try and think about your audience's learning style. Practice your presentation at least 3 times. And given what I was saying about attention spans, make sure you practice the beginning of your presentation and the ending of your presentation more than the rest, because those are the key places. Then don't forget participation. Always involve your audience, because involvement equals commitment. It will give the best outcome, and your audience will be more on side with what you're trying to achieve. Then we got the actual performance, delivering the presentation. Maybe another time we can look more deeply into that, and dealing with nerves, and making maximum use of all your resources in terms of the performance. And then post-event, whether you're giving an in-house presentation or a conference presentation, there's always something you can do to follow up afterwards. And again, that cements rapport. So try and make engagement a thread as you go through each of the protocols, and the plan one is the one that we've considered in a little bit more detail today. So we don't want to see the buffering thing. We don't want to see the dazed and confused look on our audience's faces. By creating rapport, by creating a great communications channel with our audience, we won't see that. What we'll see is smiling, engaged faces, people that are open to participating and to contributing to the overall experience. So if this was a live presentation, I'd be asking what questions you have right now before I summarised, but this is a recorded presentation, and so I will be with Dan soon, and we'll be dealing with the questions and having some interaction then. So I will move on to my summary right now. So here are a summary. Follow the 7 protocols. This will give you magical results. The 7 protocols are tools that every nerd and every geek can use to deliver a great presentation. You will see a magical difference when you implement the 7 protocols. And of course, what flows through that is the rapport with your audience. So in the plan protocol, spend time organizing your material. And you'll remember that's where I was talking about top down or bottom up. Top down was splitting the main thing you want to say into 3, and then giving 3 levels of or 3 points of detail in each of those 3 points. That's the top down one. It doesn't have to be 3s, but somehow 3s just work better. The bottom up one, which was the one I personally favor, was doing the brainstorming, throwing everything down on some post-its, and then afterwards organizing them into groups and finding the natural headings that you've got. Then you've got creating a structure for your presentation. And of course, the obvious part is the beginning, the middle, and the end. You perhaps have heard people talk about tell them what you're going to tell them what tell them the main thing, and then tell them what you told them. And that is true. But if you're not careful, you're going to tell them how you're going to bore them. You're going to bore them, then you'll tell them how you bored them. Don't do that. Follow the 7 protocols for the perfect results. And then the last part of plan was paying attention to attention spans, the beginning and the ending. And then even though it dips in the middle, you can actually get peaks in the middle of the attention span by using that proof that I was talking about: primacy, recency, overemphasizing certain points, making some points outstanding, and by using familiarity with what people already know to cement in new concepts with them. So there's the summary. If you'd like to get a free report about why nerds aren't heard, then go to letthegeekspeak.com/free report, and you will receive a PDF. It's called 7 Ways That Geeks Sabotage Their Own Presentations and What to Do About It. And here are some resources. There's a book that I'm working on. I'm still 2 chapters from the end, so we'll get that one done soon. But I also offer training and coaching in the art of nerds getting heard, geeks speaking, propelling ahead with their presentations, and there are remote options, so I can deliver that remotely if needed. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to this presentation and for watching it as well, and for participating in this presentation in your mind. As I mentioned, letthegeekspeak.com/free report. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, my handle there is dduffett. It's been a pleasure presenting this information to you. It's been a pleasure explaining the 7 protocols, and most of all, you will have pleasure in using these 7 protocols and proving that you are a geek that can speak. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, David. Every single time I watch one of your talks, I go, I don't follow that, and I don't follow that, and I don't follow that, and I really should do that. And maybe I should say and a little bit less. But it's difficult when you're in front of people and when you're in front of a camera. So let's bring David in now. So hello, David. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Dan. How about you today? And good to see you sport your Let the Geek Speak jacket.
I got this jacket 2 years ago, I think, in Florida, and so I had to put it on for the occasion. And it's also very cold in my office this morning because we've got a storm passing through. So we've got a couple of questions in our Matrix chat. So yes. one was from Antonio. I know you've already answered them there, but let's get them onto video yes. for posterity. So Antonio asked, how can I elicit sincere feedback about a presentation? People generally don't like to give negative feedback, but constructive feedback can be helpful, i.e. from an audience specifically, i.e. strangers.
Yes, absolutely. We want to get good feedback because feedback is the breakfast of champions. And so what I would say is creating rapport with your audience from the very word go is the best way. So you're actually kind of lowering the bar for them to talk to you. You don't appear to be this distant presenter in an ivory tower that's just spewing out information. What you're trying to do is engage the audience the whole way through and make it easy for them to talk to you. Now, having said that, it might be that somebody wants to give you some very fierce feedback that's going to be helpful to you, and they don't really want to do it in front of everybody else. And so end of session feedback forms, sometimes known as happy sheets, are very useful for that. But again, you've got to precursor it and say, look, great, if you've had a good experience, that's excellent. If you've loved it, that's excellent. But if there's anything you could do to improve this presentation, let's pretend you've got some valuable colleagues coming on the next session. How could I make it, even better for them? Then you're you're encouraging people to give you that kind of constructive feedback.
Right. And then we've got another one from Marco. How much would you leave to improvisation in a presentation, if any? For example, to account for comments from the audience or unforeseen events. A quick comment from me. All of my talks are improvised completely and utterly. But David is going to say something that completely goes against that.
Well, no. I certainly don't advocate planning your presentations down to the second, and it's a stilted, scripted inflexible experience. I certainly don't advocate that. But what I do advocate is actually getting familiar enough with your presentation, your material, so that you can veer off in any direction that the audience takes you and come back if appropriate. Maybe the audience feeds back that what you're telling them is totally inappropriate for them because most of them are leaving next week, or there's a new system coming in, or something like that. And so being familiar with your material is actually the key there. Practicing is the key, so you feel comfortable kind of jumping into it, jumping out of it and jumping back into it when appropriate.
Yeah. And different things work for different people, don't they? And you've got to find your rhythm and the way that you make that work for yourself.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I would always say that a key part of a great presentation is being true to yourself. Having said that, there are universal things like practicing a presentation would actually improve everybody's presentation, no matter what
Absolutely.
their style is, as an example.
Absolutely. All of my presentations would be better if I practiced them. But when you finish them 5 minutes before, that's difficult. So thank you very much, David. We're going to move on to our next session in just a moment. But thank you very much, David, for joining us and for giving us his insights into being able to improve your public speaking skills.
Thanks for having me along.
Thank you, David. And we'll see all of you in a minute if you're watching live. If you're watching on demand, make sure you like and subscribe.